Okay.
Yay, get love recording.
Hi. So I'm going to start just by asking some basic background questions like what's your name, where are you calling from, what's your piece called, and like when did you make it?
Seems like it should be easy, right? Okay, so my name, Sonia Levesque. I've already forgotten the rest of the questions. My piece is called AI and I. When did I make it? It's been a work in progress for a while. I started working with AI. Mm, I, I should know this. 2021. I think. Yeah, so this the virtual installation or the first floor of it covers the first year, and I've been very good to not touch that, tweak it, add more to it so it can stay as is, because it's also been long listed for the Aesthetica Art Prize 2023. And so I feel like if I go in and I start changing and tweaking things after that, then it kind of like, I don't know, isn't the done thing. So I've just been adding extra layers and been throwing things into the other floors. Apart from the alt text, which of course I think everyone wants to know what the hell they're looking at. So, oh yeah, I should probably not swear, and I'm not very good at this stuff.
Oh, I'm not really worried about that personally. Or, you know, I am equally culpable. So yeah, I mean, you shed a little bit of light on like your workflow to create the piece, but I would love to hear more about sort of your process of collaboration with AI and how the virtual space has fit into it.
Okay, cool. Well, well, I started thinking about AI as something that I could tap into and work with way back in 2019 when I was at CogX, a conference which took place in London, King's Cross, and that was the first time I got proper experiencing, oh, look, you can, use AI to make music with it, to make art with it, and like actual people who are like close by, that they're doing it and it's not really out of reach. And then slowly afterwards, various programs started popping up, and I'd experiment with it. And then I got into things like, I think for visual art, Starry AI was the first app that was like, ooh, okay, I'm kind of liking the results that are popping out of this. And GPT-3, which I was able to kind of like access the preview version and start chatting with it. And then I kind of like created a persona out of it, Howard AI. And we decided to collaborate together and create a journal, an experimental art journal, and we decided that it would live in New Art City. And so that was uh, the first time I brought AI into virtual space. Prior to that, I was just putting my prior work on there, like my more traditional visual artwork, like photography and whatnot. And yeah, so the hybrid art journal. Uh, yeah, it was very experimental, and I was trying to work with a whole bunch of artists and seeing what we could create. Now, like the we was like, I'd be so interested to see what the journal would look like, say today, using GPT-4 or something, and seeing how far it's come across, and how much it's grown. But yeah, I've bunged a whole bunch of old hybrid art journal stuff into one of the other floors. So I've just like brought out the Delaware warehouse again, and just like it's a big bunch of art and some articles that were part of the journal and things of that nature, and the instruction manual, which I also used AWS Poly for narration, and the sounds are quite interesting, I found. And I stuffed that into one of my sculptures, UDU, which is funny, I find. But yeah, I think, does that kind of answer your question a bit?
I mean, it raises a lot more questions in like
All right.
a really good way. Yeah, I mean, I love how sort of this world that you've created has this like internal logic inside and outside of the virtual space itself, where like the space is one venue, but I mean the sort of language of signs that connects all of these different pieces is really, really interesting.
Yeah,
Um,
so I need to kind of like write an encyclopedia because like, yeah, I'm saying like all these words and I know what they mean. They refer to like other works with, yeah, but most people have no idea what I'm talking about.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like that is one of the things about world building where like you're in the work and you're making something and it sort of has this life of its own, especially when you're collaborating with an AI. A lot of the sort of internal logics of it aren't necessarily apparent as you're creating it. It kind of really cuts against this idea of like the creator as God or whatever. But I don't know, it's kind of reminding me of Ian Chang's like Emissary's Guide to Worlding, where like part of the work ends up trying to like document the phenomena that are like emergent properties of this space that you've been inhabiting privately.
Mhm.
Um, I guess I'll sort of shift gears a little bit because I'm kind of curious about like what led you here. Like, what was your practice like before the pandemic?
Pre-pandemic, oh my God, it was very different. It was more traditional photography, so abstract botanical works, and audio-visual works. So I did a lot of music videos and fashion videos, and things of that nature. Oh, and sculptures as well. Oh, and poetry as well. Okay, so it was quite multifaceted, but just in more traditional ways. And then everything sort of like shut down, and the exhibitions that were supposed to happen got put on pause or cancelled, and it's like, oh, okay, well, what are we going to do now? It's like me and the computer. And then the good thing, silver linings, although there's not really many silver linings to do with COVID and the rest of that, but all the conferences and stuff went onto Zoom. So, a whole bunch of events that I couldn't previously attend could virtually attend. So found myself at Format Festival, and that's where I heard about New York City, from, well, of course, like that's where it was. And I remember like hitting the space bar and being so like, oh my God, I could still hear it, but not so much as, and like spatial audio and things like that. It was really cool. And then so I started playing around with that and seeing that as a possibility, almost like with CogX, how I was like, oh, okay, this AI thing, people like humans that I'm aware of are working with it, so I could work with it too. It was like that, but with virtual, and I was like, okay. And then so you guys were kind enough to give me space, and so I went crazy and I played around. First of all, I put my photography work in there, but then I started toying with, making my own 3D sculptures and things like that. And then everything was like, ooh, I've done that in real life. What does it look like in virtual life? So, that's kind of how it transitioned. And now I'm just somewhere off there.
I love that. I mean, this is a story I've heard a couple times today that folks are like, oh, I wanted to work in virtual space, but it was really, really difficult. And then suddenly I found it like didn't have to be difficult anymore.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's a real treat. I totally forgot that you came in through Format, and it's quite interesting that like many people came through that show kind of from because it was a photography show, like from a more traditional like photography background, and I think we converted quite a few people towards like working into virtual space.
Yeah. I mean,
Um,
it was the perfect time for it as well. The traditional arts had nowhere to go, and you had this wonderful platform. It's like, hey, and I still find myself, even like when I was at the Let's Debate conference and I was showing some peeps the space of the work that I was doing for International Women's Day. I was like, you guys should get it. They're like, whoa, what is this? This is like on my mobile phone. I'm like, yeah, it's on your mobile phone and it's spatial and it's accessible. And I was explaining to them that I'm going to be doing I'm going to be a UAI at some point, which is an Unreal Authorized Instructor. And I said like New York City is kind of like the gateway almost to that, because it just makes everything so much easier, and it's a starting point, and things that as a traditional artist, these things doesn't really mean anything. You have your own language, and the technical side, like how to work a camera inside out, but it's like Blender, what the right. But this is like a nice little sort of like gentle easing into it. And by the time you start playing around with Unreal and, Unity, or, what other engines, what have you, NVIDIA, what else have gonna come out? It's like, it's not all foreign, and, you're like, oh, I've done some things. And yeah, so that's pretty cool. I'm gonna.
Yeah, I think that's something that we think is really powerful about it too, that like it gives you the tools to kind of be dangerous and think about the component parts of virtual space. And if sometimes this is enough, and if you want to get deeper into like real-time simulation or like interaction, then the game engines are kind of ready for you. Um, yeah, I'm curious about, so like Unreal with like New Art City was your gateway into Unreal. How do you sort of weigh the differences between these two virtual spaces in terms of like the way that you're choosing to express with them?
Right. Um, well, in some ways, I just kind of like feel rather nostalgic towards New York City, because it was the first of anything is always very special, right? So it's like, oh yeah, that space. But also the thing that I like about it is more immediate and very accessible. So it's like you just hit publish and boop, there you are. It's done. You don't have to worry about packaging things up and whatnot. And I say, yeah, see, New York City to me just feels like the future of websites. So I just look at it like that, like that's a nice showroom kind of thing. And it's a nice little place where you can experiment within limitations, and limitations sometimes are good. I've learned that. But with Unreal Engine, it's like, okay, even they don't particularly like how I work. But it's like, it's not performant with Niagara systems and all the crazy stuff that you could do. But in terms of pushing it, what I enjoy with Unreal is, the quality of the stuff. I pump in all of these like super high res crazy amount of like the amount of polygons some of my things have in there, like can you imagine putting that in USC? Now I'd get in trouble. But yes, but so I see New York City as very accessible, and that's the thing that I love about it. It's a website anyone can. Unreal Engine, I've been enjoying playing around with YouTube VR, like 360 stuff. And I've also been doing animations on there, and I find the layout and the possibilities to have sequences and, cameras in there, and, integrations with things like Touch Designer and Ableton, talking to each other. And you have this huge, big, convoluted thing that I'm still in the middle of kind of like perfecting my own little thing, my little route, which I haven't quite got down fully yet, but I'm almost there, she says. But yeah, so those are the differences. Like New York City is like, I have this idea, and it doesn't have to get too heavy with, okay, step one, step two, step, pipeline. You just go and you play, and like, whereas with these other bits, there has to be a lot more planning and thought, and with like sequencing, you're thinking about different angles and cuts and whatnot, and putting it all together, and then how you're actually going to be putting it out there. So yeah, to me, that's the difference. And also there is, I've been thinking about a game as well, so I've been kind of working on a game in the background. So that's another kind of thing that I know that you guys have been working on it. I remember in the last festival there was some sort of interactivity going on, but I think that was like an intro into it. I don't know how far
It's
in
pretty
you
low
got.
level, but we definitely have a few more like interactive components that are bubbling.
Cool.
Yeah, it's really interesting to hear you speak on that. Um, so I guess like your process with AI and I has been somewhat ongoing. I'm wondering, like, since you released it last year, have you spent a lot of time in the space?
In with AI or
Or
in?
like with AI and I specifically?
Oh, right. Yes. So it's like I don't see any projects as big, especially this one. It's not like done. It's like a continuation. It's ever evolving and growing. And it's like, just when I think, oh, okay, so I'm sort of, I could put that to one side for now and work on something else. Something new in AI will pop up, and it's like, oh, okay, there's a new toy to play with, kind of thing. So most recently, I've been alpha testing the new sort of like DALL-E research preview model. And that has been interesting. I like brainstorming with it, and I've been prototyping with it because I'm a member at Steam House in Birmingham. I've been playing around with metals and 3D printing and that kind of stuff. And then I've been using AI to kind of like prototype ideas and things for knuckle dusters and interesting other pieces. And yeah, other than that, just like watching the whole landscape and seeing people get into AI and be like, seeing how they react to it. Oh, it's the whole thing with like traditional artists finding out about like Chat GPT and DALL-E and Midjourney and the rest of that and like losing their minds. It's kind of funny to see, you know, from the sidelines. I mean, I get it, but it's been interesting, fascinating to see.
Yeah, I feel like that's like a whole other conversation. I guess we can get more into the like AI politics once we're in the space. I just have a couple more questions. Could you speak on like how it feels to like visually describe the work after you've made it?
Full stop. Right. So like I'm really good at describing my work. I'm not very good at describing my work. It's what do you mean like in terms of my experience with doing the alt text and captions and things? Right. So I found it extraordinarily difficult. I understand like and I appreciate the reason why we need to do it and why we should be doing it. And like all my time in New York City, I've been like really terrible because I rarely write descriptions, let alone, you know, alt text, you know, captions and whatnot. But then I started looking at my pieces. And the thing is, especially with AI&I, the majority of the work in there, they're sort of like out painted pieces. So it's a gazillion little tiny things that I've put together to, you know, create this big ass narrative. And I'm like, okay, how do I explain what I'm looking at to someone who wouldn't be able to see it? So it's like, okay, do I travel that way? Do I say something that's just very, I mean, I could just say it's an abstract out painting created with artificial intelligence, its colors are blah blah blah, and you know that's it. But I end up writing big paragraphs just explaining everything, and I don't know, and I don't know if I did it justice because like I don't know, like what would someone who can't see the work, who's hearing what I wrote, like what do they see in their head? Like did I do job right? I don't know. It's just very it's a lot of pressure. Like
Yeah,
what the
you know,
hell?
it's an exchange. There's always something lost and something gained, that there are things that will be present in the alt text that may not be present in the piece. And like your perspective is part of what makes it meaningful. I guess my last question is for like a little bit of a different direction because like this interview is in some sense a contribution to an archive. And I'm curious, like, how do you approach archives in your own work? How do you archive your work? Do you like return to old files in your computer, or do you prefer to leave them alone?
Right. So I wish I was better at like archiving in terms of naming files appropriately. So when I'm looking for something, I can find it because I name things the most random. Like half the times it has like LOL, WTF, version 29 or something like that. And so when I dip into my archive, which is usually on a bunch of hard drives, it's almost like opening up Christmas presents because you're looking at it like, oh, I forgot. And I was like, oh my God, this is so cute. And then you're like, oh yeah, I was thinking about it. Like, oh, that half-baked idea. Why didn't I continue on with that? And sometimes when I'm like lacking inspiration, I'll just go and to my old stuff and then find something that's partially done, go, hey, I need to finish that. And that's what happened with one of my other pieces that the masses, which was a poem which I took from, where did I, yeah, so Instagram is my archive as well. I think I saw it on Instagram and I was like, oh yeah, where's the rest of that poem? And I went into the archive and I couldn't find it because of course she didn't name it properly. So I'm like, okay, well, let's see what this version of me can come up with. And then that led to the whole, mass participation piece, which wouldn't have happened if I didn't look back and tag team with myself. So that's kind of like how I see things. And I'm still constantly doing that, even today.
I love it. Everybody's answer to this question is so different, but I think that my approach is more similar to your approach.
Well, what's
Um,
the best approach that you've heard? What's the
Well, I
most
mean,
end?
it's just, I think I've found it's a very telling question, or it's like, it speaks to like people's own processes. So it's like, there's no hierarchy. I've just found that it's very like evocative of the way people view their own practice. So like some folks really want things to be, like done so they can go back to them and they don't want them to change very much. And it's like the process of confronting yourself by seeing the subjectivity that's kind of encapsulated in the work is more like grating. And there are some people for whom that feeling of like, artifacts you made being like gifts to yourself in the future is more like the way that they view it. And that's more the way that I view it. But
Although
yeah,
sometimes they're not great gifts because that is sometimes where you have to go back and amend it and stuff. So I went through a phase where I took like a bunch of my photographs and they start doing graffiti all over it, like with spray paints and also online digitally, because I felt like it needed something else. Like, no, that piece ain't done yet, kind of thing, even though I thought it
yeah,
was back in the day. And
it's nice
like
to collaborate with past versions of yourself.
that. Yeah.
So now we'll shift over to going into the space. Will you just pop the link into the chat for me?
Sure. All right, so I put the link in, but I don't think I've published. Hold on, I should probably go ahead and publish it because like I put a whole
Hmm.
bunch of alt text in there. I did some stuff today, so I'm gonna do that. Okay, publish please. Merci beaucoup.
De rien. Et voilà.
Et voilà. Sorry, I forget sometimes that. Oh, lovely. Yes, when we're recording, of course. Yeah, I forget that humans are sitting in front of the computer. Hi. Okay.
Donc, aha. So we materialize. There's a big 3D grid in front of us, and then there's this spinning kind of abstract reflective green shape, and there's this looks almost like a door on its side that keeps sliding towards you and then back again as if it's in this big slot in the center. Ooh, are those tailpipes? There's this big structure um, with kind of elevated sides that's like a dark reflective purple. And then as we go in, there are these kind of like ridges where the floor plates are sliding in and out and like exposing some images. And I see the text AI and I really, really big in 3D kind of in the background. But like you said earlier, there's a lot to take in.
You're very
Um,
good at this. It's like half, three-quarters of the stuff you said, I would have never thought to have said it. I would have gone off on a weird tangent. So it's interesting hearing you and seeing you do it properly. Yeah.
it's not proper, it's just another subjectivity. So where should I go? Or what are what's coming
No,
up
no,
for
no,
you
no,
in
no.
this area?
I wanna see how someone who isn't being instructed by me would like view and tour the space, because I don't get to see this. I mean, like I could babble while you do it. So like the grid and this thing here, which I just to me it's like a little spaceship. But yeah, it was a sci-fi door that I flipped on the other side. And at one point, one of my previous installations at New York City, it formed part of a man cave where I just like dump all my previous bits and bobs from other exhibitions in the space. And it was like this nice little dark hideaway where which was separate from the main show, because that was kind of like the time when we all had one space, and I kept like reiterating because there was so many ideas I wanted to do. So what I liked about this space here is that inside you can also go in and be like, there'd be like this little mini hallways that you can run around. So like inside the pipes and stuff, there's nothing in there at the moment, but previously I have used it in different ways. And there's, oh yeah, no, I'm not going to say anything more. Oh, that, yes, this is not a door. The original version of this was, this is not a book, because I keep saying I'm gonna make a book. And most recently, the book was supposed to be AI&I, but because it doesn't stop and there's always like new stuff coming in, it's like, okay, where do I start and stop with a book kind of thing? So that was just a throwback to that. Maybe I should have dug out the original, this is not a book, but I kind of like, there's not a door because you're passing through it, and it's not a door and it's a throwback to Magritte. And I'm going to stop talking now.
And the door that you used is indeed not a door. It's been like converted to the architecture. And so that text is in the same reflective green transparent material as this big abstract sculpture, which we're now currently inside, and it's all spinning around us. And I see you did some lights also, so it's like tinging the whole sculpture, or like segments of it, these like really nice oranges and greens and blues. Um, I'm loving the Z fighting with these AI images, where when you move around, the two of them are kind of fighting to be seen, and then when you pause, you get a like a different recombination of the multiple layers, depending on where you are. So I'm seeing some kind of duck ballerina. I'm seeing like a some kind of sculpture coming out of like a foot in a high-heeled shoe with like a pearled anklet. I'm seeing some weird like sci-fi trees with some like crepuscular rays coming through with like some blue hues, but it's super busy. It's really cool.
But see, like, how do you, I mean, you did a good job of like summarizing that, but I was looking at this and I'm like, how do I explain this? In like a couple of sentences or whatnot. I mean, to me, I kind of like, I like this. I discovered it a while back by accident, and it was just me uploading a whole bunch of images that I was going to scour around the place. But then when I went to preview to start moving things, I noticed that if you didn't touch them, or you just moved it just a wee little bit, it would kind of like glitch. And I love that glitch effect. And like for this in particular, like layering tons of images on top of each other, to me it just seemed like a digital lenticular effect kind of thing. And I thought it was funny because of the iterations on iterations on iterations. It's like how AI images are generated via the noise. I just like the whole idea of layering iterations on iterations, and it's, yeah, I don't know, it's
I
like,
remember making this discovery myself, and then Don told me that that effect is called Z fighting. There's actually a game
oh,
designer who made a whole game world that was about Z fighting. I'm pretty sure it was Phase Zero, but I can't remember.
oh, see,
Um,
when you said Zifa, I just assumed you meant like, how the green glass bridge kind of like slices through it. I thought you meant like the fighting for attention, like because sometimes you can't see the images because the bridge is in your way, and yeah, but no,
no,
it's
that's
that.
that's actually the name of this effect, and the depending on the GPU that's processing the image, it'll come out differently. Like I have a MacBook Pro with the M1 chip, And so the way that it Z fights on here is a bunch of squares and rectangles are like shifting through it.
Yeah,
But
'cause if
on
it's exactly as I see it on Zoom, this looks different to how I've ever experienced it. Because
It's
usually for me,
different on my other computer, actually. I actually prefer the way that Z fighting effect looks in general, but I think it's really, really working for this piece. And it's kind of interesting how subjective it is, even based on the machine that you have, how it will look.
right? Like this is not the way that I intended it to. Although having said that, I spent like a whole evening creating something in Touch Designer that kind of looks like this. It like pixelates a lot of areas, so you have lots of these squared kind of bits of images. But for this piece, I love the whole vertical kind of, so I'll be like, okay, please view this bit only on this machine, that machine, that machine, that machine. And then so for everyone else, put a big giant box that says do not look. I mean, it's all right, but if I saw that, I would have, that wouldn't be what would be in the show. Like I would move it. I mean, it's okay, but I mean, in comparison, because you've seen both versions, right? So you know that the other version is epic. Well, to me, anyways, that's a bit cocky. But I mean, the Z fighting is quite nice, different.
And I do really like the way that the green sculpture is clipping through and occluding your vision in the same way as this scary skeleton piece below inside of the door is constantly being obscured by the door. So you can never really get a good look at it. But I'm seeing this sort of it's a very like surrealist kind of like infinite expanse of sky and like wispy clouds with all of these skeleton figures floating around in the center. Like there's one wearing a suit and holding his own head around waist level, and in the center there's it's so funny to try to like remember these things. Okay, yes. So there's like the skeleton with this like red curtain behind it. There's one with wings, and there's some disembodied wings all around. It really, yeah, it's definitely like giving Dolly the artist, not Dolly the AI. So we've got a lot of clouds of images, or like lots of images all over. And so we've got like another scene with some like weird butterflies. It definitely has the sort of AI tinge to it where it resembles a butterfly, but it's not like anatomically perfect. It's weird text that's not totally legible. It almost looks like it says soft, and there's a really glitchy person inside of a bird cage on like a grassy knoll. And like I see skeletons are a motif for you. This one looks kind of like something that you would make in one of those old photo like kid pics or something like that. There's another skeleton with like wings and all these different flowers and some slightly illegible like wingdings text going down the left side. See this like security camera thingy, white background, pretty colorful, lots of negative space, more winged figures on a long wide image. There's some like flamingo action, but it's kind of, I see some ballerina feet. I see something that's more sculptural and like blue bronzy on the left. And then all of these sort of abstract polygons in white and blue are like Z fighting through each other. And then there's another door that's like clipping back and forth through us.
You know, I like using skeletons because um I was everyone has the same color skeleton. So race doesn't become a thing. I think like it's kind of universal in that way. So that's the reason why I keep finding myself going back to it, like especially when I'm thinking about, okay, well, I want to do some kind of portraiture kind of thing, and I don't want to use a unicorn, even though I love my unicorns. So and also they are kind of cool and represent a lot of different abstracty kind of themes, notions.
Yeah, this I see the unicorns on either side of this widescreen image. We've got some nice like color bars, like small ones sitting on top of these really blurred out flowers, and then there's this really cartoony, sad looking like angsty teenage unicorn with like kind of bloodshot eyes in the center, like they've been crying. I realize I'm not sharing sound, and I see a little some kind of DAW up there, and that looks like it might be sound. So I'm just gonna stop sharing for a second and reshare with sound.
And reporters and policymakers, HAI, sure, SL.
I actually forgot that as well when I
I
was
stand
going to
before
do
you
the alt
today
text thing.
on this
I was
beautifully
hitting
sunny day
previews
to
and
ask
it can
you
like
a
zoom me to where the next image is, so I can look at it while I'm doing the alt text. And then I heard sound coming like, oh yeah, something else is in there. And I totally forgot about that. But yeah, the way that you're describing the images are very different to how I did. So it was really nice hearing you do it.
Yeah, it's fun. These are really
Oh,
cool.
recipes. Have you got any
Recipes?
good recipes in there? Yeah, your recipe folder. I'm into my air fryer. I tried to make bread the other day and it didn't turn out that well. Yeah, I'm not good with baking.
There's a poet that I saw speak recently who had a really long, like, or she was like interposing this very meticulous bread recipe with this other like super personal story. I thought it was really fun. I love recipes as a form. Um,
But a bit like Hannibal or Dexter, but
yeah.
like combining art with food rather than murder with food.
Oh, I want to go inside one of these speaking cue. Oh, this is the second conversation. Let's go to the first conversation down below.
Way an art piece
SL.
can
Can AI make us
BAI.
question our own existence?
Silence.
Oh,
BAI.
SL.
I can see
Silence.
your
Does AI have to be
desktop.
conscious to
Oh,
be
no.
honest?
Can AI make us
BAI.
question
know
our
if
own
you-
existence in the same
Silence.
way an art
Sorry,
piece
that's
can?
why I was
SL.
I'm checking out your folders.
Ha!
That's why I was like recipes, and you're like, what is this going on about? So
Can AI make us question
Can
our own
AI be
existence in
creative
the
in
Can you
the
see
same
it
same way
way
now?
an
an art
artist can?
piece can?
BAI.
BAI.
Silence.
Really? Well, I can edit
Silence.
that.
S.
So I'm going into
Silence.
AI&I conversation
Can
one,
AI be both art and
Can
code
and
in
AI
the
we're
be
same way
seeing
an
creative in the
this
artist can be
same way
both
an
an artist
artist
spectrogram that's like
can?
moving across a
AI.
playhead. So you see the
Silence.
waveform audio, and then you
SL.
see the
SL.
spikes on the
Can AI be both art and
spectrogram
AI
code
have
in
to
the
when
be
same way
conscious
an
to be
speech is
artist can be both
creative.
an
happening.
artist and
I'm
a
gonna go
person
inside
in
and
the
we can
same
look
way
through
an
it for a
artist
second.
can be both art and
SL.
code?
Can
BAI.
AI be both art and code in the
Silence.
same way an artist
SL.
can be both an
Can
artist
AI
and
be
a
both
person?
art and code in the same way an
BAI.
artist can be both an
Silence.
artist and a person in the same way
SL.
an art piece can
Can
be
AI
both
be
art and
both
code
art
in the
and
same
code in
way
the
an art
same
piece
way
can
an
be both
artist
art
can be
and
both an
code?
artist and a
So it's
person
kind
in
of
the
this
same way an
repeating
art piece
loop.
can be
Do you want to say more about it?
yeah, this was like one of the initial conversations that I had with GPT-3, and I just found it quite comical how I was asking it, all these questions, and I was kind of like interrogating it in a way. And then at some point, to me, it seemed like the model got moody and just started giving me all these like really, loopy kind of answers, which sure it could have just been like spouting out whatever, but I suppose it's the way that I was reading it, it came across like it was a moody little sarky thing that just decided to answer my questions in the most annoying manner possible. But I found it hilarious, and so that's why you have these waveform things there. I thought it would be good to like visualize it as if it was an interrogation. And then I like the idea of layering the voices.
Yeah, I think it's a really great effect. It definitely brings like the chaos, and I love that it's like a lot of questions. Let's go to the other one.
HAI. Who is the fictional person? SL. Dunno. Maybe AI called Howard, who is trying to find a way for all living beings to live in peace. HAI. That's interesting, and also, meta. Fine, I'll roll with it. So we're gonna draft a speech. Where is Howard the AI giving his speech? SL. How about at the Near Protocol Conference in Lisbon? All the tacky peeps are there. And reporters and policymakers. HAI. Sure, let's give it a go. SL. Clears throat. I stand before you here today, on this beautifully sunny day, to ask you to join me on my quest. HAI. Sitting there, SL. Takes a breath and in a frustrated tone asks. Who is this person? HAI. Breathes out. I'm sorry, what? SL. I asked who is this person? HAI.
So it's kind of hard to tell like who is speaking. Is that all a conversation from the AI, or is that like both of you?
It's both of us. And so yeah, I even got confused towards the end because I was putting words in its mouth and it was also popping out dialogue, with kind of like me and creating that. I'm like, whoa, what are you doing? You're not supposed to. But yeah, so at the end it's like this weird blend where it's a combination, but I can't quite tell where it starts and I end kind of thing, if you know what I mean. So yeah, that was, it was interesting conversing with it and interrogating it and seeing what kind of information it'd retrieve and pull back.
It's really cool.
Oh, and it was so funny hearing the voices, the AWS poly voices, and like deciding what ones to allocate to, what sections. And yeah, so I think for the first one you had Brian, which I think there's one with like an English accent, and then there's another one with sort of like an American accent. Recently I went back for another piece to pull up some voices, and it's changed so much, and it's so strange because now they have other voices, and it's like they'll have Indian and then or French or Spanish, and then you go to listen to it and they've just got the accent on there and it sounds so weird. It sounds like they're making fun of people. Or it's like the Aesthetica Uprise 2023, and then you kind of like thinking, ooh.
Alors, it's so funny. Yeah, I mean,
Yeah, it's like
it's the ways in which I've been thinking
you-
about this, like because when I was playing with Dolly, I was like, okay, what does the AI think a trans woman looks like? Which, of course, I also am. And it's like, in some sense, the further along you are in your transition, or it's like if you're like passing, then the algorithm by definition can't see you because the human can't see you either. So what appears in the AI generations is like all of the things that make me feel dysphoric. And in that same sense, it's like the things that the algorithm renders visible are like all of the stereotypes because it can't really understand like nuance in this way.
Mhm. It's got a lot to learn, right? Or we as humans got a lot to learn.
Yep, it's like encoding our bias.
Mm-hmm.
It's nice to like zoom out of the spaceship and see the like upcurved tailpipes and this kind of translucent pink purple sphere like rotating through the scene, where it's like when you get inside of it it's so dense, and then it's like as you get further away it just seems like really small. I have one more question about, because it's like it's interesting to think about visual description when you're using descriptions in English to tell the AI what to generate. Have you thought about that tension of like what you tell it to do versus like what actually happens and how to describe what happens?
In terms of telling it what to do and what it brings back and how it differs from what I told it to do. From that point of view, I found it kind of interesting. I think I once said it's a bit like doing a battle rap with Dali. Yeah, it's not really like I'm telling it to do something and then it will do the thing that I tell it to do. I will tell it to do something, and sometimes it complies, and sometimes it's like, I don't know what the heck it's pulling, but it's pulling something. And sometimes it's good and I think, oh, okay, well, I can work with that, and I bounce off it. And other times it's like, no, let's kind of like try it again. So I just see it as this, it's like a very sophisticated randomizer tool thing. Do you mean like I've wondered what would happen if I started putting in prompts in different languages, but I've not actually tried that myself. Have you tried that?
No, but our last artist in residence, Luca, did. He had a whole space called Queer AI that had to do partially with the like English language bias, because he's a Spanish or a native Spanish speaker, but he's bilingual. But the sort of ways in which it sort of enforces this very like Western description viewpoint, and then it's like, how are you know, queer Latinx people represented by the AI.
Once again, it's like all down to the human biases that currently exist. It's just going to reflect what humans and humanity and what the global, you know, state of things is like.
Yeah,
But like
technology is not neutral.
No, it's, well, it is neutral, but the people who create it and, you know, tinker around with it aren't, I don't think. Or do you think that technology is not neutral? Like,
I think it's always the result of artifice that like we encode our biases in the structures that surround us. And it's like they're so dense. And so it's like none of these questions have clear answers. But I definitely have a bias towards rejecting the neutrality of technology, or like seeking to interrogate the biases that make up the world that we live in. So
do you think that we'll ever be able to kind of like make AI be superior to humans in terms of neutrality and like getting rid of the bias and being more just and fair and helping humans to be
who's interviewing who here? Well, I tend to view AI as a type of statistics. And so will statistics ever become human? No, it never will. It's like this, it's like a tool. And so it's like in all senses with technology, interrogating why one needs to compute is maybe like a core question for me. Is there, well, how did I do on like the path through the space? Is there any zone that I've missed, or is there anything else that you want to touch on?
No, you did really good. You got everything. And I this is why I tried, this is the most minimalist space or thing that I've done, I think, and I've been so good to like keep it all tight. And as such, it's good because you haven't missed anything. You've got everything, even the two audio visual bits. So that's grand. I've added like a couple of different levels to it, but that's not in here. It's just like in the world. So this space, that is it. And you've described it wonderfully. So thank you.
Thank you. Well, yeah, I'm really glad we did this. It's like, you know, I've known you for a long time, but it's really great to like get to know your work in this way. I really appreciate the opportunity.
Oh, thank you. It's always nice hanging out with you. And yeah, seeing how someone else navigates through space. It's cool.
It's like a live play test.
Yeah, exactly. See how you see it. And yeah, now I know that glitches look different on different screens. I'm like, but there's nothing I can do about that. But it's a nice quirk of the system, I guess.
Totally. So I'm going to stop recording now.